Right. It's going to be quite a long meeting. There's a lot to go through. I realise that we're all in here, and thank you. It's quite difficult to see everybody from this particular position. So in my sort of like usual teacher role, sadly, I'm just going to ask that we don't all talk over each other. We do go through the chair, and you need to put your hand up and make sure I see you. And not constant separate conversations everywhere. So I'll tell you what, the acoustics here, it's a bit odd, quite frankly. So what with the screens up and everything, I'm sort of hearing left, right and centre. So I thank you for your patience and timeliness. Before I do anything else too, I'm led to believe we will be audio recording this meeting. Is everybody okay with that? Yes. Is there any objections? No, thank you, that's lovely. Just wanted to clarify that everybody was okay, thank you. So, thank you. Start with the agenda. Any apologies?
Councillor Austin is on her way. She needs to train at St Agnes, so she'll be here.
Thank you. Number 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No? Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not looking for a fight, honestly, but we are going to be discussing a rather important issue a bit later. And we know it's a contentious issue, and some of us support one side of the argument and some support the other side. Is it a reasonable request to ask everybody to confirm that they are not either an admin person or a chair or vice chair or treasurer of either Save Manston Airport Association or No Night Flights or No Night Flights across Ramsgate, because that, in my view, would be a declarable interest?
Well, I don't actually think it is, because I think this is a situation that involves the whole of Ramsgate, whether you're for or against it. The thing that we're discussing tonight is Ramsgate, and the judicial review itself is by a resident who's not part of Ramsgate Town Council. There isn't anybody that's got any particular interest, I would have thought, in the judicial review, other than you're for or against it, but that's a personal matter for every resident. So I don't think that there's an affiliation or association other than that we are Ramsgate residents, quite frankly.
Chair, my understanding is what we're discussing tonight has absolutely nothing to do with the judicial review.
What we're discussing tonight is the response to the Secretary of State from Ramsgate Town Council.
Yes, the writing of a letter.
Yes. So that's Ramsgate Town Council responding to the Secretary of State.
Okay, thank you for your clarity. As long as that's minuted, please, that would be very good.
Yeah, of course it should be minuted. It's on the recording as well.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other views? Yes, Councillor Wynne.
I think it's safe to say that some of us sit on two sides of the fence, and I would be quite happy to declare my interest in anything. But I think there are people who've met with certain sides of the pro or anti, including members of RSP, and those interests would need to be declared as well. Or people may have met with local MPs as a pro or an anti, and those interests need to be declared. So I think asking people to declare interest would just actually neutralise people out. So I see that as a pointless act, actually.
Agreed.
Members may declare an interest if they choose. It's entirely up to members of council whether they declare or not. If you're making no financial gain from this, then you have no interest. But it's entirely up to yourselves if you declare that you are on a group or whatever associated with one side or another.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Green.
I think we need to distinguish here between deciding on a planning application issue where expressing an opinion one way or another in public before the meeting would disqualify, and this, which is deciding on a policy by Ramsgate Town Council in responding to the Secretary of State. There's a difference, and I think that's an important difference.
Thank you, that should be limited too, thank you. Okay. Item number 3, questions from the public.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Item number 4, minutes of the council. I've got 2 sets of minutes here. The first one being the Extraordinary Council of 1st of March 2021. I'd like a proposer and seconder. People find those a true recording.
I'll propose, Chair.
Thank you, that's Councillor Alban. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Barbara Young. Thank you. And the other minutes being the extraordinary meeting of council on Wednesday the 14th of April 2021. Again, I need a proposer and seconder. Thank you. Thank you. Proposer Councillor Piper. And Jane Hetherington's the seconder. Thank you very much, Councillor Hetherington. Okay. Super. Right, so, item number 5. Committee terms of reference, policy documents, update 2021. And this is where we review the terms of reference for councils and committees and also policy documents, and I will hand over to the Deputy Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean has done a report on the email acceptable use policy and the web and social media policy, and he has put in some changes just to bring you up to full legislation as detailed in his report. For example, email facilities should not be used for illegal activity, hate and discrimination, gambling, hacking, gaming, dating, shopping, things like that. You've all got the papers, so we're asking that you agree the amendments to those 2 policies. Thank you.
I propose acceptance of the email and email acceptable use policy, Chair.
Seconded.
Thank you. And the web and social media policy?
Proposed.
Seconded.
Thank you. Did you get that, Deputy Clerk? Sorry.
Thank you, Edith.
Thank you.
We now move on to your
Excuse me,
committee.
Chair.
We need to vote.
Sorry.
Need to vote on this,
Sorry,
Chair.
my
Need to vote.
Sorry, apologies, beg your pardon. I was just thinking that as you get on down. Can we vote on this, please? Is there anybody against this? No. Anybody abstaining? Thank you. I'll take that as 4 then. Thank you. Go.
We now move on to the Planning and Infrastructure Committee terms of reference. This is a document from 2014, so it should have been looked at, in my opinion, at least at annual council each year, or as we change council. So we've had it before us. I've changed the policy to 5 because it was still in there at 4. Number of members up to 15, including the mayor and deputy mayor ex officio. All your terms of reference are very similar. If you'd like to go through it, and if there's anything there you'd like to change, you've got delegated powers in.
Yeah, sorry, to carry on, I was just letting him know that I've seen him, thank you.
So your planning committee has the remit to look at planning applications and as a statutory consultee on behalf of the Ramsgate Town Council and give its recommendations to TDC.
Yeah, thank you.
Comments to TDC.
Thank you, Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's on the front page, restrictions of appointment, where it says members are also members who are also members of the Planning Committee of Kent County Council and Thanet District Council may not be appointed. I actually see that to be I've got to be nice, haven't I do not see that as appropriate, Chair. There isn't, when planning applications come before Ramsgate Town Council, to look at. We don't know whether any of those planning applications will be before either Thanet District Council or Kent County Council's planning committees.
Right.
And so therefore, Chair, I think there is no conflict of interest as far as that is concerned, is what I see. And so I personally, Chair, I would take that out, but he would say that anyway as a member of the planning committee of Thanet District Council, wouldn't he?
Thank
But
you.
no, that's my view.
Deputy Clerk, Councillor Green and Councillor Piper, thank you.
I did seek advice on this, and there is no reason why members shouldn't be on this planning committee, so Councillor Owen is correct.
Right, thank you. Councillor Green.
Just to say that I agree with this being removed. After all, we could meet a situation where all members of Ramsgate Town Council are also members of Thanet District Council. So this
Planning committee.
There's the planning committee.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. The main point that Councillor Orban makes, I think, is absolutely right. We've no prior knowledge. It's very rare by the time an application comes here that we know in advance that it's going to be somewhere else. Sometimes they're withdrawn. But the other thing is, I think if we're not careful, we will remove some of the experience from this council chamber, and those who are experienced in hearing and debating and discussing planning applications, particularly complicated ones at TDC or KCC level, if we remove that from the room, I think we will be sadly lacking in a possible very good resource, and we would need to trust those individuals that they would not be biased in any way, or if they had a declaration of interest to make, they would do so. So I agree, I think it should be removed.
Okay, and Councillor Huxley, thank you.
I think it should be removed. I've served on both committees.
Okay. Well, from the chair, then I propose that we remove that. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Radford House and Custom House Committee. Again, policy is 5. The terms of reference are there for you. It's looking after Radford House and Custom House, and in particular, coming up is the regeneration of Radford House. Councillor Oldham is the chair of this committee, so if you have any suggestions, please do. Thank you.
Cool. I propose it, Chair.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
I propose it, Chair.
You propose it? I'll second it. Is everybody in favour of this? Your hands up. Thank you. Anybody against? Abstain? Thank you.
The next committee is the Town Promotion Committee. Councillor Austin again has emailed me with a proposal. I think you've all seen them, I'm not sure. With suggestions, which I'd have to ask one of you to propose if you agree with them. She's suggesting that, she said, can I suggest we broaden the wording under general at the start of the document to read something like a committee of the Town Council established to consider and make recommendations to Council in relation to the promotion of Ramsgate as a place to live, work and visit, or something similar to that. For the same reason, can I suggest we add a final catch-all item under matters administered that allows for this, e.g. to undertake any other activities with the objective of promoting Ramsgate that are approved by Council. That's similar wording.
Sorry, could I just ask if you could point that out to me again? What was the second part? Where was it located?
Oh, sorry. Matters in... Yeah, sorry, I need to put an email. Matters administered by this committee, which is the front page.
Right.
To add, to undertake any other activities with the objective of promoting Ramsgate that are approved by Council. She'd like to write that if possible. She did feel that the terms of reference are very broad.
That's true.
So she's asking if we could add to formulate and make recommendations to council in relation to any strategies, plans or policies intended to improve the experience of living in, working in or visiting Ramsgate and to attract visitors, investors and residents to the town. So, I mean, we could shelve this if you like until Councillor Austin arrives, and maybe she could explain. Would that help? We can revisit even if you have another item.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's nice to try to
Thank you.
explain it.
That's absolutely fine. Okay, moving on to the amenities. I need to add to that amenities and environment committee, which has already been agreed before. Just, I'd like you to agree with that. Apart from that, clauses 5, delegated powers on the last page. This committee looks after allotments, civic mayoral things, and land and assets excepting Radford House and Custom House. So it will look after Charlotte Court, Elgin Gardens if you do take those on, and that sort of thing. Thank you.
You need a proposal for that?
Yeah.
I propose what you just said then.
These will be sent out to you.
Seconded by Councillor Hetherington. Thank you. Several.
So once we've dealt with...
Should we vote on it?
Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
Could I just ask a question, please,
You
Chair?
can, yes.
It used to be, of course, the Planning and Environment Committee,
Yes.
and now obviously Amenities Committee and Environment Committee. There is still a sentence in the planning one about considering all matters pertaining to the environment, but are we to read that as they might relate to a specific planning application? I'll just try and find
I
it.
think we discussed that when we changed it, didn't we? We decided that that was also quite important, even though it was in planning. That's my recollection, but I could be wrong.
It's on the front page.
Can't find the actual sentence.
It's on the front page. It's on the very front page.
Yes, consider matters pertaining to environmental conservation. That specific reference to the environment is within the bounds of that planning application, whatever it may be, I assume, rather than a more general environment portfolio, which is now sitting with amenities.
I can change.
Is that right?
I can change that, add to that, in relation to planning matters. Would that?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Piper. I think that's correct. I think that's what it should be.
Is anybody against that at all? Or no? Take that as yes. Thank you.
So,
And just to vote on the one that we didn't as the Environment Committee. Does anybody object or abstain? No, thank you. That's carried through. Thank you.
So, Council, all of these documents will be circulated by me to everyone, so you've all got a copy, and if you need hard copies, please let me know.
Thank you.
We'll deal with Councillor Austin's committee later.
Of course, thank you. Super. Sorry, you're on again, Deputy Clerk. So, External Auditor Report on Annual Return 2019-2020.
Okay, the External Auditor certificate is attached on the back of item 6, where they found no problems with our accounting systems. But I have to ask you to agree this. So it says this council has considered and notes the External Audit Certificate 2019-2020 before I can move on to 2020-21. So if you're happy, we can do
Yep. So,
I propose that, Chair.
proposal
Thank you.
Councillor Orban, seconder.
Second.
Councillor Green.
I'd just like to say, I mean, this is excellent news for the council. And these things are automatic. So well done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Thank you. From the council. Okay. Did we vote on that?
No, I don't think you did.
No, we didn't. We voted it. We seconded it. We didn't vote. Anybody objecting to this? Any abstains? Thank you. Carried.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Item number 7, governance and audit return statements 2020-2021.
Okay, this is for the last financial year, and what you are looking at is, and I've lost it, is where all the money is listed. Okay, so basically this is all worked out by the system. I've actually managed to be allowed to use the system to create this, and I haven't had to do it by hand, which is fantastic because it just literally does it for me.
Brilliant.
So all those figures are fine, and what will happen is I will mint your agreement if you agree, and the chairman will sign on page 5 of that document, and also on page 4 and 5. What you've got there is the internal audit report, which is a separate piece of paper, white sheet of paper. He's quite happy with us. He did point out that I needed to bring the 2019-20 certificate to you before we could move on. So that's fine. He's happy with how the accounts look, how they're being managed, etc. And he's pleased to sign his part of the document, and that will be submitted with this document and all the others. There's about 7 documents I have to send in because I have to actually account for everything and work out the differences and make sure they're all balanced with the bank accounts and everything. So there's about 7 documents, including this one, I have to send off tomorrow. So what I'm asking you to do is on the front page, this council certifies that the statements made in section 1 of the annual return are a true record of the system of governance at Ramsgate Town Council. So I need a proposer and seconder for that part, followed by this council certifies that corrective action has been taken with regards to the exceptional matters as detailed in the 2019-2020 annual return external auditor report. And the note there is there were no exceptional matters, it was absolutely fine. And also this council certifies that the accounting statements made in section 2 of the annual return for 2020-2021 are a true and fair record of the financial position of the council. I can have one proposer and one seconder for all.
I propose that. Councillor Green seconds. Is there anybody against? Abstain? No, thank you, Ms. Carroll. And again, well done. That's a lot of hard work.
Could I just ask?
Yes, certainly.
I've had 1 or 2 residents ask me continually, what do we spend our money on? And I just say, staff. I've got a whole list of things you can see the guys around. But how can we relay this sort of information? Because this is not much use to an average resident. It's not much use to me as a resident. But how can we articulate in a sort of accessible way what we spend their money on? I don't know.
First of all, this document goes online. We also list expenditure under £500 online. It's all there for every financial year, deemed closable for us.
Yes,
so that's the legal requirements to do that. Members of the public can ask. They can ask. There's nothing. I mean, I've got all the paperwork. There's nothing hidden away. The only thing I cannot share is the staff wages and anything pertaining to. I can't give them details of any businesses or anything like that, but they are welcome to ask, and they can inspect the accounts.
Yeah, I know that.
That goes on the notice board with the dates that they are allowed to come and inspect the accounts. I have to take out all the staff wages, obviously, because we don't, by law, have to give those. But if they want to ask, we certainly can tell them.
I will tell them that. I'll probably put them off.
I'm not sure. I mean, we could have a look at this probably when the new town park comes along, and maybe look at what we are spending in the town.
Visual
things like that.
Do you want some sort of like graph or some notification that's easy to spot? And also, in terms of, I don't know, social media or something like that, it's very good to be able to put out what we do because again, technicians and training and things like that, I think that's quite a good PR push. We should be explaining all of the environmental stuff and everything we're doing in that sense.
So everything energy saving stuff as well should be out there.
Definitely. So once we get the town clerk, it'd be good to bring that sort of thing up to the meeting, wouldn't it? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wing. Sorry, just Councillor Young first of all.
I was wondering if we could sort of have a mini report in the community magazine.
Yes, again, once the town clerk comes, it's a very good idea. If we could minute these ideas,
Yes.
thank you. So when the town clerk does come along, we can come back to them. Thank you.
I
Chris.
don't know if I'm allowed to speak, but I did speak to Eileen about me writing a report to council every month about what we're doing, what problems we've got, positives and negatives.
Yes. Please do, because again, the rest of us wanting to push that out into the community to make people aware of what they're doing, especially when we get asked on the street or social media things, anything like that. That would be really useful, Chris. I know it's small time asked of you, but we'd be very grateful for that. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Huxley.
Just to say, Chair, Dean Williams did a sort of graphic on two sides of a bit of A4 about what the council actually did.
Yes.
And I think that's on the website.
Right.
It's got sort of green bits in it.
Yes.
So you can sort of translate it to what we actually spend on each bit of what we do.
Yes.
As well.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
I think my comment actually is very similar to Lumina's because I couldn't make the annual town meeting last time, but the time before, that was all handed out on the seats, that double-sided green page, and I was thinking if that was updated with some of those costs. So I think we're probably talking about the same thing there.
Yes. Thank you. And then again, making it accessible to the public, of course. Thank you. Good ideas. We'll note those. Sorry, Councillor Green.
Just on the point that Chris made, I think that's a good idea, report. I think it should go to the Amenities Committee and to F&G.
Thank you.
We consider the two aspects.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So, we're okay with government's audit statements, aren't we? We've done that one. Brilliant, thank you. Okay. Number 8, Ramsgate Fund and Events Fund. Thank you.
Okay. The Ramsgate Fund is for capital items only. I think Councillor Green did raise the idea of looking at the criteria for the Ramsgate Fund, and perhaps we could do that at F&GP at some point and make a recommendation. The budget for 2021-22 is 35,000. The maximum amount which may be awarded is 10% of the fund, or 3,500. Awards made so far are 3,357, so you have a balance of 31,691.43. This is a fund that is, we don't get a lot of applications. We do push it out on social media.
We have managed to, sorry to interrupt, we have managed to actually spend that money every year though, haven't we? From what I recall, don't we?
No.
Oh, we don't? Okay, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'm sound corrected.
We really don't.
We don't roll it over either.
The events fund.
Oh, don't we? Oh, okay. Oh, it's the events fund, sorry, beg your pardon, thank you.
Yes, the events fund is not well spent. Well,
Right.
it is, but current climate we're so we have 4 applications. Panic Community Development Trust have a project expenditure is 23,000. They're asking for 3,000. The funding is sought for an additional print run of the guidebook they also served in order to have free copies for anyone wanting to learn about the world wars and their effect on civilians in Mansgate. It's all in their application. Council to decide.
Ben, would you like to talk to this?
Yeah, Chair, if I may, I just think it's a very important thing for the town to remember part it played in allowing us to be where we are right now. And I think the amount of this, they've been going for some time. I don't know whether they've applied for any grants previously, but I also think that maybe I'm up for giving the grant, Chair, and I would propose it, but I would like to add to that. I would like to see them advertising. I know nothing about. I've never known anything about this until I read it.
Yes.
And I would like to see them advertising it more, so it can be highlighted, especially for children, so that children can know they have their freedom because of people who gave up theirs. And I think it's very important. Yeah, that's just my view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Green and I've got Councillor Huxley and then I've got the two at the back with hands going up on there. Thank you, Councillor Green.
This is the one from Thanet Community Development Trust, is it?
Yes.
I thought with the Ramsgate Fund we usually asked for a breakdown of the finances of the applicant, and I can't see that.
I do have it. I did share it with the councillors. I'm trying to. It's a huge document, so lots of paper, I'm afraid, but it was shared. They have supplied to the year end 31st of March 2020.
And following on from that, it's unusual to get this sort of application from them. It's usually from some sort of military organisation. I wondered how much of the grant would go on administering what they're proposing.
They are asking for £3,000 would print 2,000 additional copies of the guidebook. So it's the cost of the printing of the guidebook.
So it would all go into that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's a good thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Huxley.
Oh,
sorry, God, it is. Sorry, God, I knew that.
As many before us will recall, Councillor Green and I have often objected to applications from this particular organisation, and this is an unusual application from them. However, I can see the quote that's attached that shows that the cost of printing is ever so slightly more than the amount of money they're asking for, and generally I like what they're planning to do here, so I actually would approve of it, and I would be happy to either be a proposer or second for it on this occasion, but no.
Thank you. Councillor Zetsky.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I, like Councillor Oldman, agree with this donation, and therefore I'd like to second his proposal of giving the total grant of £3,000.
Okay, thank you. So we have a seconder, Councillor Fifer.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on something we mentioned a couple of times, the last time we gave grant funding to this organisation was in May 2019, and it was a grant of £2,026.69 for funding the purchase of tablets to use for digital inclusion activities for disadvantaged people in Ramsgate. And I note that along with their request to us, they have this year received £20,000 from the Armed Forces Covenant, so it would seem that we would be assisting in the right way. So I certainly would want to approve it as well.
Thank you. Right, so we have a proposal on the table. Can I have your hands up for the 4, please? Unanimous from what I counted. I should say, any against, any abstains? No, thank you. Thank you. Next one.
Thank you. The next one is Harley Kent. It's an organisation based in Manston. They are asking for full funding. The project is £750 and the grant is £750. So they're asking for funding is sought to provide lip reading outreach classes for local residents in Ramsgate with hearing loss to be delivered by qualified lip reading tutor using Zoom. This is to pay. Tutor fees are £625. Including communicating with students, student registration and the gathering of feedback is £62.50, postage is £15, and publicity and advertising is £50. Because that's the total, so it's for tutor fees, which doesn't sit with the fund. However, council can decide if they wish to fund it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I open it up, do we have a number of how many people they are going to affect? I know they've got statistics for people with hearing impairment, but do they have a number list of who's on their books, as it were? No, I couldn't see anything at all.
No, it doesn't say.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, thank you for looking. I've got Councillor Young and Councillor Wynne, thank you.
I was just wondering who else is funding this idea as it's situated in Manston. How many people is it going to reach? Is every part of the county going to put money in?
I believe, Councillor, that this is literally just for the Ramsgate side of it. So this, the £753 would fund just for Ramsgate.
How much time do we get for that? Do we know?
I wouldn't know.
We don't know.
They don't say.
No, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wynne.
I've supported two of our residents who are deaf. One of them go to the PIP session when I first got elected, and I desperately think we need to try and support, but I know it doesn't sit with the remit of this. Can we go back, if they're using an online platform, is there any way that while they're providing this outreach classes, that those classes could be recorded in some way, so that they could then be a capital of something that's there,
a teaching resource,
a teaching resource, which then would fit more into the remit, and also could be maybe, I don't know, passed into the, I don't know whether we've got a hard of hearing and deaf organisation in the town at all. I think facilities for people with hearing problems are not very widely available, so I definitely think we should be doing all we can to try and support this. I'd like a bit more information about how many hours, who it's going to hit, and whether the online platforms can be turned into a teaching resource.
Yes. Thank you. I've got Councillor Young and Councillor Huxley and Councillor Hetherington. Thank you. Oh God, George, I can't do this, can I? Why don't you just swap places?
I'll answer to Councillor Huxley.
Oh, you know, I've made worse gaps, I'm not worried. Thank you, and my apologies, of course. Anyway, sorry, Councillor Young. Oh, Tony? Did you want to speak?
Yes, I did. I mean, there's a note there that says that they were running clinics at the medical centre at Montefiore and St Mark's Students. And what I suspect they're trying to do is that these clinics, like a lot of other clinics like that, aren't running now.
Yes.
So this is probably in some way to augment their service and try and get it running again until these sort of clinics can be open. I support it.
Thank you. Helen.
Thank you. We'll stick with, so I'm Helen Huxley now. I don't know if this partly answers some of the comments earlier, but it does say at the bottom of page 3 that it's 1 hour a week for 3 terms.
Oh, right, thank you.
So the actual numbers reached will be however many turn up.
Yes.
Obviously there's no actual limit to that, I assume.
Yes.
I very much definitely agree with Councillor Wing that if it was recorded in some way so that it could be future use. I noticed that at the top of page 5 there is a short subtitled film clip showing their lip reading classes when delivered at a physical location. So that might be worth being aware that they have got some recording facilities. But if they are going to record it, then that's going to increase the cost. So we might need to think whether or not we go back to them and say, with a suggestion about recording it, with possibly a view to an increased application. Might be worth considering.
Okay.
So
thank you. We'll come back to that. Sorry, Councillor Hetherington and then Councillor Green.
I haven't got much to add to that, except I think lip reading is extremely important. Having actually learned lip reading myself as a child, I just think this is an extremely good resource.
Yes. Councillor Green.
If the Zoom sessions are interactive with clients, there might be difficulty recording from the personal point of view. This is outside the remit of the fund, I think, but I think it's a great cause, and I think we do have the power to move outside the remit, and I would support doing so.
Having just done a chair's course recently, I mean, one of the things that has really sort of pushed is, health and wellbeing at the moment, especially after the pandemic and so on and so forth. And I think as a council, we really need to take that forefront to my mind. And with niche groups like this, I think it's very important that funding is available, and maybe we need to bend the rules to a certain extent to allow that, yes. Before I say anything else though, Councillor Orban, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Whilst I agree, this is a worthwhile thing, and I think it's appropriate. However, the last paragraph does say where they was in the division of Montefiore Medical Centre, St Mark's Church. They are making strenuous efforts to reopen our hearing aid maintenance clinics as soon as possible. Now we understand, do we not, that on the 19th of this month things should be back to normal, allegedly. And after appropriate risk assessments and establishment that safe practices can be applied to new locations. So it appears to me, obviously, they are trying to get this open as soon as possible. And what I suppose what was lurking in the back of my dark mind is that giving the money out and then they open up, and that's what just worries me a little bit. But I do support the.
I was going to say, it might worry me if it was sort of like £3,000 or something. Yeah, considering that we've got how much sitting in the bank, this is 753, and it's going to help some people. I'm less inclined to worry about that. But anyway.
I'd like to follow up on that. I mean, we've worked with young people throughout the pandemic, and obviously I don't particularly work with the high-level gang-affected people like the guys doing that are London-based. But what we found, we had to move quickly to online, working with groups of young people and also individual young people to keep our service going and try and keep kids safe. And actually what we've found is it's become a very useful tool, not only for them but for us. Not for every kid, because face-to-face I still do the vast majority of mine is door knocking. But what it also does for people, and what I understood when I supported two people when I was early elected, because I didn't really have that much experience with people with no hearing, is they find travel very difficult, because when you can't hear anything coming behind you. And I think this could well turn into a pilot that they may well pick up and establish, because if you can have an hour of tutor time and you haven't got to get on a bus or get in your car, you can do it from your home and it's just as valuable, then why would you get in your bus or get in your car? So I strongly support this, because I think it could also enable this provision to think of other ways of working. And obviously if they're working with small groups, they may well be hitting a greater number of people, because a greater number of people can log on, they haven't missed buses, it's okay to travel, so it's not okay to travel. So I think I would strongly support that we give them this money and we allow them, we explore, we ask them what else they need actually, because I don't think there is enough services for people with hearing problems.
Right, who thought this would be so controversial? I've got Councillor Young, Councillor Hetherington, Councillor Green.
Is there some way we could monitor how many people use the facility?
Well, we could ask, yeah, we could ask for a report back, yes, but
I automatically send them a returns form, so I send that by email, and I can ask them if they can just give a list, or a more detailed list of how many clients they looked after. That's not a problem.
Thank you, Councillor Hetherington.
Just very quickly, I mean, we have a far better attendance for online groups now. Initially people were against it, but certainly across the thing with substance misuse services, the online groups are extremely well attended now, which is good.
I agree, it's quite intense, it's quite involved, any online learning, isn't it? And I think it just hits one person when there's no distractions from other people interfering and stuff like that, it does make a huge difference. Councillor Green.
Well, it was just a thought really that when we, as we will soon, be broadcasting our full council meetings, we might well make use of their services if they're willing.
Yes,
And support them that way.
yes, that's true. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ara.
I think it's just a very good cause and I wholeheartedly support it and I hope we can give them the full amount.
Right, well, as a proposal then, I would like to offer them the full amount at this moment in time, with the idea of the recommendations that council have given with regards to recording if possible, and also they might need more money for that, and also our services, you know, we might need them for our services at a later date, so to be able to liaise with them and explain what would be needed from our end. I don't know if I have a second to that. Thank you very much. Any, right, so the votes for, people for. Thank you. People against? Abstain. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
The next one, R06, is Ramsgate Arts Fund CIC. Total projected expenditure is 250,000 for the whole project. Grant requested is £1,549.94. The funding is sought to pay for full planning application drawings and installation and supply of electricity post. They've supplied zero balance accounts to June 2020. They were previously funded in October 2020 for £1,000. I do know that they are crowdfunding, so they do have money sitting there. So I think you all know the Arts Spark barrage. Thank you.
Go on, Councillor Orban.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, me again. I don't support this, Chair.
Okay.
And the reason I don't support this is they want the money for a planning application. They've got £31,132 sitting there. They can use their own money that they've got already, and I don't see that this council should be funding people to make a planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. The young man who has submitted this, he invited all of us to a Zoom meeting on Monday, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it was quite embarrassing that there was only the three of us who actually tuned in to listen to what this young man had to say. I was cheeky enough to say that the barge needed an awful lot of work to do before it was acceptable in anybody's eyes. And then the subject came up of it being there when we celebrate our 200 years of being a royal harbour. And he said, you know, it could be moved. But I don't think that Ramsgate needs another arts project, so I will not be supporting funding for this plan.
Thank you. With regards to who tuned in, I think that's quite a difficult one. I mean, some of us work full time and it's during the day.
I don't know.
Well, I think that was it. Yeah.
Came to us all.
Came to us all. But it is, things during the day for a lot of people are very difficult, and I respect.
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock at night. 8 o'clock at night.
And I work at 8 o'clock at night on a Monday. So, sorry. So, from the back, thank you.
Thank you. People don't think me and Steve got something going here, because I've been totally again with Councillor Holden.
Well, if you have got something going, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and we might be supporting this. Thank you. That's a good one.
Thank you. Pat?
I won't support it either. I think there's plenty of other places in the town that could do this without having a rusty old barge sitting there trying to raise £250,000. And I really think it ought to be moved before our celebrations. And do they pay any more in fees?
I would imagine they would, because they had to.
They had to.
They would have to.
Well, where's that money coming from?
Who knows?
Okay, Councillor Crittenden, Councillor Piper, Councillor Wing.
Okay, I was one of the ones that attended the meeting the other night. On the one hand, I really actually like this project, but on the other hand, it came across as very half-baked. And on that basis, I'm really not happy about funding it at this stage because I am far from convinced that this will, it needs something more before it looks like it will fly. So that's my view. I think probably we share it.
Thank you, Councillor Piper.
Thank you very much, Chair. There are a number of questions floating around, rather like God really, on social media about this project. If I could just share a little bit of information with members so that they're kind of better informed. The barge is paying full mooring fee prices to Thanet District Council. I did try and get the information via the leader of TDC, but Mike Humber was not prepared to give the figures, but Kevin O'Connor gave the figures at the meeting the other night. They have paid £15,000 in mooring fees. The idea of the boat being where it is was not his. The idea came from the leader of the council and from Mike Humber. He has said that at any time he is asked to move the vessel, he's happy to move the vessel.
Okay.
And I am aware that TDC are asking him to move the vessel, largely because of the celebrations that are coming up for the anniversary. The reason it was plonked in the corner there was because when it was out by the end of the harbour arm, youths were jumping on it and running up and down. It was considered potentially damaging to the boat and harmful to the youngsters. It was he was very enthusiastic, but he's been left holding the baby. This project was somebody else's, and they ditched it when they realised how expensive it was. Pardon me, I'm using the vernacular. They ditched it, and he's been left holding the baby, and he's valiantly trying to do something. I too think he's on a hiding into nothing. Okay. And I think I can't really support it.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ring, I've got Councillor Green, and then I've got Councillor
They are paying their half mooring fees. Sorry, you before me?
No, it's Green, Green, I can see
yeah,
that
but
one.
they are paying the mooring fees, but the question I have to ask is how was the thing ever allowed into the harbour? Because it's not going anywhere else, and the cost if that boat needs to be removed is 60,000. I've been told. The boat itself is actually quite a historic boat of the people that know boats, but why it is there, and also why that other pontoon is there, where the historic dock used to be that Laura Sands opened. This is something I can't support either. It's just one of the worst projects anybody could ever take on. I desperately feel sorry for the person involved in it because I believe it was bought for £1, brought here, and the people that originally took it on and brought it into the harbour just run off and left them holding the baby.
Okay. So see where we're going with this. So let's go Councillor Green.
Yes, Chair, I'm quite conflicted by this, because I think if somebody managed to bring it off and it was a successful project in the harbour, it would be good for the town. Yes. And I think we supported it last year, wasn't it? With £1,000 to wish them goodwill on their way. I haven't seen much progress since.
They have had various fundraising activities throughout the year.
Yeah. And the fact that they're still going
yes.
is to their credit.
Yes.
So, although I'm no longer chair of town promotion, my view is that I would support a modest further contribution. I would propose £500.
Okay, we've got a proposal for £500 on the table. Do you have a second that? Councillor Austin. Okay, I know, thank you, Councillor Green. I know Councillor Mackinson wanted to say something before we vote.
Well, I was just wondering why Del Renzio and Del Renzio get to do everything in this town.
Oh, well, do you know, that's by the by, that's not about this, is it? So let's...
Stuff into the university.
Yeah, that's not part.
Well, it is in Ramsgate House to do this.
Well, no, that's not part of this. We're looking at monies for this particular
No,
group.
they're saying that it's not possible to provide because they've been working, so it is to do with us, it's on here. They're not providing alternatives, because they say they can't. And secondly, something that's not to do with us, but if you walk down the harbour line of an evening, there are 12, 13-year-old kids sleeping off it and climbing onto those 2 barges already there.
But is that to do with this though? That's what I said.
No, that's not to do with this.
Right, so
I just thought I'd mention it because there used to be a man sitting in a hut.
But Pat, that's not to do with this. So let's stick to the matter in hand, really, because this is what we're focusing on. And if you want to bring that up at another time, another meeting, by all means. But let's actually focus on what we've got here. We've got a proposal on the table for £500 for a seconder. Personally, I followed this from the beginning, and I know. I knew of the story. Sadly, I couldn't make the Monday meeting. I wish I had done. It was fun. Working wasn't so fun. But they have carried on this amount, and I think what Councillor Orban says with regards to if they can get through this bit, then we can look at it later on down the line, because it would be a community asset. Might be something that council want to consider. That's up to you, isn't it? But anyway, there's a proposal on the table, so do we give them £500? Hands up for. Who is in favour? Did you count?
7, 2, 7.
Against?
9.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, I propose that we don't give any money over to this project at present. Thank you, Chair.
That's rejected.
Do we want to, did you want to amend that to until, or, because you said at this moment, but you haven't explained why.
Okay, Chair, I'll remove that moment and say we don't give this any money.
Rejected full stop.
Rejected.
Okay.
Yes. I just want to say that looking at what the grant is for, so 813 full planning application, so that's not concrete, that's we're buying a service which wouldn't fit the remit of this. And that would go to Del Renzio Resenzio, so that's paying for a service which doesn't fit the remit of this funding slot. 736 is for the installation and supply of electric posts, and we're paying Thanet District Council. So I don't think we should be paying Thanet District Council for installing electric posts that they should be providing on the port in the first place.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm concerned at the wording of Councillor Alden's motion just now, because it implies that we will never fund them ever.
Yes.
And I do rather I like the project. I just want to see it.
Chairman, that's not what I said.
Okay,
That's not what I said. You can think about how it came across, but all I'm saying, we're dealing with an application. I'm saying that we don't give any money to that application.
That's
If that clarifies
this
that.
application is rejected.
Yes, basically is what yes. Thank you. We have a second. All those in favour?
No, you rejected giving £500. You rejected the motion.
Rejected
Then don't we revert to the substantive?
Yes, and I've just said that.
Right, so we're rejecting that.
Yes.
So all those in favour of
This is to
rejection?
reject the application.
Yes.
Thank
That
you.
application, that's now clear. Thank you.
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, point of order.
We don't have to give a reason, but normally we do.
Okay.
When we reject an application.
I feel more comfortable if we explained ourselves, because we want to, surely we want, I don't know, to explain how that we think they should go about it, but anyway,
Chairman, they are aware that it doesn't fit the criteria. So
right, well in that case.
that can be, yes.
That's
Use that as, thank you.
Right, well that's that one. If it doesn't fit the criteria, then it's a whole different matter, isn't it? Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair, very much. I know I've spoken on this already. In case it may make members feel a little bit more comfortable with the decision we've taken, that the only part of the application that does fit within the fund for capital project is the electricity post to provide power to the boat.
Yes.
there is a very high likelihood that very, very soon the boat is going to be moved. So that would be a wasted donation in the first place, because I am told by TDC that he has been asked to move the boat, and he said on Monday night that he would move it if requested.
Right, okay.
So they will actually need the boat.
Thank you. Okay, so you had the against, so we have the, we had the for, beg your pardon, do we have the against? One.
Against.
Two.
We're on the against
Councillor Alden's proposal. So he's rejecting it, so we've had the fours, we've got the against, and now the abstains.
I was totally confused.
Don't worry. It's carried, you're fine.
Yes, you are for it.
Yes.
You are for being against it.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more, which I will hand over to Councillor Green for. This is 2020 in Nethercourt Estate. Have you got it there?
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
I hope the paper is self-explanatory. This council, I can't remember the year that it decided, but it decided that it would support 20 mile an hour speed limits on all residential roads, and that supporting the Nethercourt estate would be their first priority in this. Since then, I've been working with Kent County Council. Well, first of all, there was a straw poll in Nethercourt to see whether the population wanted it. I mean, it wasn't hugely comprehensive, but there was a clear majority in favour of 20 mile an hour zone for the estate. Since then, I've been working with Kent County Council to see what they required to bring that about. And the first thing they required was to do a speed survey on the roads, which I've included in the paper. It turns out that the average speed of traffic through the estates isn't much above 20 mile an hour. But as you would expect, there is a substantial amount, 15% according to KCC, that are travelling more than almost 30 mile an hour or greater. So it meets the Kent County Council's criteria for introducing a 20 mile an hour speed limit without, and this is significant, without any further traffic calming measures, which the residents didn't want for obvious reasons, and also, generally speaking, the emergency services subject to. So it means that it could be introduced for a reasonable amount of money. If you start putting in traffic calming, it becomes very expensive. Kent County Council estimate the costs to be about £6,500, which includes £3,800 for a traffic regulation order and about £1,700 for signage. And both our Kent County councillors have expressed their support, and I will be asking them for their financial support, which they've indicated they are sympathetic about. Kent County Council themselves have also indicated that they may be able to fund some money towards this, because they have a policy of 20 mile an hour speed limits on estates anyway. But they want an organisation that could be county councillor, or it could be this council, to take a lead. So what I'm asking for is a grant towards this from the Ramsgate Fund for £3,400, which I think is the limit, towards this project, provided that I can raise the rest of the money. Kent County Council also wants to do a comprehensive survey of all residents to ensure that there is a majority for the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I've got Councillor Crittenden and then Councillor Zexley and then Councillor Austin in that order.
My point of order, Chair, just where's the application form?
Yeah.
All I've got is a piece of paper. Where's the applications? Everyone else has got application forms. Where's the application form?
All right, I'll let Councillor Green reply to that.
There isn't one. It's not normal for this council to produce an application form
for itself. But
I can certainly provide, I could certainly fill in the information that would be on the form if that is required.
Thank you, Councillor Crittenden.
I think Councillor Green may already have answered this, but is that at the end we're about the majority of support from residents. Is there any cost connected with that, or is that entirely covered by KCC?
There is a cost. There will be a cost. I was intended to cover that through my, the grant that we all get as councillors. I was intended to cover that through that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I mean, I support this. Obviously, I'd like to see the whole of Ramsgate 20 miles an hour off the main streets. But I don't see it fits here. But I think it's something that should go through. It's something we should fund or part fund as a council. But I don't think it should be coming through this funding pot. I think it should be going through finance and purposes. The Finance Committee, and definitely I think it's something we should all support, because if we can get one area split and we can see it work, but it definitely shouldn't come through this system here, this process.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
That's more or less what I was going to say. I was going to say,
yeah.
Yes, it's a great idea. I'm worried about if we've said to the Arts Barge, well, what you've asked for doesn't fit the criteria.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this fits the criteria, but I think it's an excellent idea.
All right, I'll hand over to Deputy Clerk at this point.
Council's already agreed to support this. I can find the minutes and share it with you. So we could actually use the town improvement budget to fund the amount that Council Green is asking for, if the Council agrees.
Right. I had hands up before the Deputy Clerk spoke. Are they down to Councillor Huxley and then Councillor Piper, thank you.
Just one question, why does the traffic regulation order cost £3,800? Seems an enormous amount of money.
That's an excellent question.
I was saying the same thing, I thought,
I've been involved in trying to get some W lines put down in Truro Road, Albion Road.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah.
It's such a bureaucratic nightmare, but why does it cost that amount of money? It's ridiculous.
Yes, a good question, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I agree that this is a good idea, it's a lot of money. If we £3,500, it's a lot of money from us to support just a small fraction of the Ramsgate area. I think it needs to be revisited, perhaps give this Nethercourt project less money so we have more money left over to do other pockets of Ramsgate where people want 20 miles an hour limit. I think that's a lot of money in proportion to the number of people that it will keep happy.
I stand corrected, but I thought, from my recollection from previous meetings, Deputy Clerk, do correct me, I thought again, we want it for a larger area and we knew that it was a safe bet that we could do Nethercourt. I have to say it's one of the things that I get talked about a lot when I get emails from residents and everything, and it was the most ideal situation where we could start it off to see it works, that we could move it around. So we did agree on this in a previous meeting. With regards to the amounts, well, I mean, it is what it is, quite frankly. That's not necessarily something that we can do about if it's costs from us. But is it minuted from what we decided on in the last meeting? Can we find that
It will have
information?
been minuted. I don't have it with me, obviously, but I can share it. You could agree in principle.
Exactly. So I don't know, Councillor Green, if you feel okay if we brought it to a different meeting.
I'm happy to share with the Deputy Clerk's suggestion of using, what did you call it?
The town improvements budget.
And a decision on that being taken at the next financial general purposes committee.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Is anything you want to talk before we move on then?
Chair, I'm not convinced about 20 mile an hour speed limits, and I'm only saying that because people don't adhere to them any bloody way. People who drive above 30 mile an hour limit will drive above a 20 mile an hour limit. That's human. You've got the case in Cliftonville West, where you see along the front, the seafront there, past the Turner Contemporary and other parts. Personally, I do stick to the 20 mile an hour limit, but a lot of other people don't. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just saying...
I have to say, Councillor Orban, statistically we get this at schools all the time around school areas. It doesn't matter if they don't hit it, anything less is less. That's the way it's looked at, and it's exponential. So it's very interesting because you start lowering the speed down, it starts lowering the tone around an area, and then anything less when you hit a child definitely allows for the ability to live for longer. There's all sorts of documentation statistics on that. So that's out there.
Chairman, you didn't let me finish.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
I was just making a point that this happens, whether you have a 20 mile an hour limit, a 10 mile an hour limit, or whatever limit you have, people will still speed. But what I was saying was, I do support us having it, and I do support us having it in the town, throughout our town.
Sorry.
Thank you.
For interrupting. Sorry, I've got Councillor Piper and Councillor Young.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I'd
just like this to say to Councillor Green that this is an astonishingly good piece of work. Very, very thorough, and I don't mean to be patronising, but you need to be congratulated for that. It's an excellent piece of work. Thorough research into what's going on. My only slight hiccup with this, wherever we might draw the funds from to contribute to this effort, will we have set a precedent? And when I come before council with a proposal for the Highfield Road area of Northwood Ward, or when the councillor from Newington comes before council and asks for money for Newington Ward for the estates and any other pocket estates, we're going to be in trouble if we say no. So I'm looking towards our Kent County Council councillors, and as somebody mentioned just now with regard to the vote, why would we be paying TDC to do that? The question straight away is, why are we paying KCC to do something which the government and they and everybody else thinks is a good idea?
You know, Councillor Piper, I don't think you'd have an argument in the room about that at all. I think we're all agreeing with you. Why are we paying
the amount.
KCC?
I think we could contribute, but I would say, for example, a £1,000 potentially for each of the wards would still be several £1,000s coming from this council.
Fair enough, but we are contributing. It isn't the whole amount, as it is 3,400 compared to the 6,500 it would have been originally. So we are contributing.
If there are 10 constituencies, if there are 10 wards within Ramsgate, and they're all asking for nearly £4,000.
But likewise, this is Ramsgate's money for Ramsgate, isn't it? So if they were asking for it, then we look at that, and if there has been a precedent set, then there's been a precedent set. That's the way it is, really. Because if another group need a 20 mile an hour service, then they need a 20 mile an hour service. Isn't that just the way it is?
Yeah, just pointing it out, Chair.
Certainly, thank you. I've got Councillor Young, and then I've got Councillor Green, and I've got Councillor Wing. Thank you.
I noticed that in Margate, they've got the 20 mile an hour run by the offices there where the traffic lights are. Would they have the information about how much they paid?
Yes.
And how much was contributed.
That was financed by KCC councillor there, Barry.
Okay. So how much did Margate contribute towards it? Do we know?
That's Kent
Nothing.
Council funds.
So good, I mean, good point.
They haven't got a parish council. They
So
can't contribute.
why should we have to contribute if they don't?
Certainly, but I think isn't that what Councillor Green's saying, that he was going to speak to the Kent County Councillors? I mean, that was part of his preamble, wasn't it? So I'm sure he will. But I'll hand back over to Councillor Green now.
Yeah, just to answer a couple of things. In terms of enforcing, Kent County Council say that just introducing a 20-mile speed limit zone reduces the average speed by about 6 miles per hour. So that would mean that there would be, if that applied to the Nethercourt estate, I think that would reduce most of the 15% that's currently faster than the speeds that are down on the list quite significantly, and is worth doing. In terms of enforcement, Kent Police have told me that they have handheld speed monitors, and they are quite happy for their PCSOs to make occasional, what do you call it, monitoring on the estate. And what happens then is if they find anybody exceeding the limit, those people then get a knock on their door telling them not to be so naughty. And if they persist, if it happens again, they can be fined. And that is the Kent Police's attitude to this. I've spoken to Ramsgate PCSOs, and they are more than willing to take part in that. They're also willing to train. We have a very strong residents group in Nethercourt that currently monitors the streets at night for troublemakers. That group is more than willing to be trained by the PCSOs in the use of active bus. So yeah, I think Steve is right. Enforcement and compliance is a problem, but I think it's still worth doing, even though there will be persistent offenders. In terms of the money, yeah, I think you know that I would negotiate as hard as I could, both with our county councillors and with county council itself, to suggest that they should be supporting this financially. And if I'm successful, of course, it wouldn't need so much money from this council. But I would like to have something in my hand to offer to open those negotiations. And yes, it would create a precedent. It would show that this council is willing to support these schemes. But it doesn't mean that we would have to support every scheme that comes forward in a single year. We could restrict the amount of money we spend per year on this sort of scheme, and I would suggest that's what we would have to do.
Thank you. So I'm suggesting, as Councillor Green, sorry, I will come to you, Councillor Green. As Councillor Green said, he's going to go to the Kent County Councillors and speak to them about it, and then we bring this to another meeting. I don't know if we need a proposal seconder for that. Right, so I propose that. Seconder.
Yeah, but can I mean, if we take it to FNGP, is that what you're suggesting first, so that I have something to say that this council
But
will offer.
But as Councillor Austin's point was, if it doesn't fit the remit, then we can't really decide on the monies here, can we?
Yeah, that's why I accepted the Deputy Clerk's suggestion of taking it through another route.
Yes.
But I would like some sort of buy-in from this council before going to these other bodies.
So what are you suggesting? What do you want?
Well, I'm in the hands of the councillors. If they don't think it's right for this particular fund, then I would like to be able to be given the nod to take it through the FNGP route.
Isn't that what I just proposed that we can vote on? So I think that's exactly what I said. I think we're talking about the same thing. Just before we do vote though, I've got Councillor Wynne and then Councillor
The other precedent I'm worried with, and I agree with Councillor Piper, is that 3,800 represents over 50% of funding that really should
It's
be...
3,400. I don't know whether people are getting different figures.
It's 3,800 in here, it says.
But David has asked for 3,400.
Okay. It's still over 50% of the total funding of the total funding, and that is the responsibility of KCC Highways. So one of the things that worries me is they will expect us to always contribute. But I do support the scheme wholeheartedly, and I do think we need to give David something to play with. I am the worst person on a beach. I end up paying more for 2 towels than I would for 1 single towel, so I'm the worst person at this. There are 7 wards. There's no guarantee that the next ward coming along, for instance, Central Harbour, is massive. The cost of Central Harbour, if you looked at all of it, would be more than 6,500. I'm guessing. And we did agree that Nethercourt would be a pilot. I would suggest we look at a figure of 1,000 to take forward. We've got 2 KCC councillors and we've got KCC also that should be funding this.
So are you suggesting, even though we're taking it, I've put a proposal that we take it to a different meeting, we actually put a figure on the proposal that we take to the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, right, so we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar about Councillor Green needs some sense of what we are likely to fund going forward to the next meeting to a different fund. And on that basis, I was going to suggest for simplicity that we would consider the cost of the signage, which is 1,700, as an easy figure. So that was just my suggestion if it's going forward to another meeting.
Councillor Austin.
The signage could come out of this, couldn't it? Actually, the signage probably qualifies, doesn't it? Because it's hardware.
Yes.
So we could vote that now.
Should we be paying for something which is the statutory responsibility of another?
Well, no, it is. We have the same thing with trying to get trying to get a sign at the end of the Harbour Parade to say that there was no through road, and KCC said we would have to pay for it ourselves because it's not a statutory responsibility, and nor apparently is that.
Yes, thank you.
But it is the end of the way.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I mean, the whole thing on this is that I believe this should be going up in front of the Joint Transportation Board at TDC, and it's not for a matter for an event or town promotions or whatever meeting we want to push it forward to. I think this should go straight to Joint Transportation Board, and they will approve the funding and pay for it between TDC and KCC, not through us.
Joe, and wouldn't that be lovely? Do you think that would ever happen?
Yes, I do.
Because
I do. If you've got councillors, county councillors who are sitting on that. You've got TDC councillors who are sitting on that. They make the decisions. I've sat on it myself. When you sit there and you go, yeah, that should be a yellow line, yeah, that should be X amount.
Do you know, the only thing I've seen for Ramsgate that's happening around here at the moment is us doing it, and I'd like to, in some ways, sort of like keep things in our own hand. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not suggesting the council do that, but every time we ask for TDC or anybody else to do anything, the markets being the prime example, I'm not seeing it happening. No. Do you know what I mean? So,
I think you've got to put it in front of the Joint Transportation Board. There are councillors, I don't know if any councillors on here are on Joint Transportation. I stood in on one meeting, well, a couple of meetings, and did the business to say, but whoever's on the board now, we should be approaching them and saying, right, we want this put through. Does Ross Binks, do you know, still?
She is.
Chairing?
Chair, the only Ramsgate councillors on the Joint Transportation Board are our two county councillors.
Well, there you go. Why are we using them?
Well, we are. Isn't that what Councillor Green's suggesting? That's exactly what he's suggesting, isn't it? Hang on a second, Councillor Axley.
There's TDC councillors on Joint Transport Board. It's Councillor May Saunders is the chair.
Okay. Well, we have. Sorry, go on, Councillor Orban.
Chair, we have a proposal.
That's what I was about
Can we
to say.
just? Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was about to say.
Deal with it, Chair.
Thank you. So we have a proposal at the moment that we put this to a different meeting. Councillor Wilson's rightly said with regards to the amounts that we could amend that proposal to 1,700, we could actually vote for that now.
Sorry, Chairman,
Go
you have a proposal from yourself and Councillor Young to bring back to F&GP.
Yes.
You also have an amendment from Councillor Wing to give £1,000. So you need to speak on the £1,000.
Okay.
And then if Councillor Austin wants to come in with...
It was just a suggestion, just because
Right.
Councillor Christensen had mentioned the signage, that was all.
Yeah, 1,700 I thought Councillor Crittenden said, to be honest with you.
Oh, my understanding was that Councillor Wing would propose 1,000. Yeah, Councillor did. She did.
Right, okay, so it's 1,000. But thank you for clarifying that.
You don't have a seconder for 1,000. So if you
The problem is, if you go down Trish's room, you have to have the application form filled in because you're now putting it through on capital, hit through this group.
Yeah. So, okay.
Only if council decides it wants an application.
Yes, because we are applying for ourselves,
That
aren't
would
we?
create a precedent.
Yes.
So you currently have a proposal and you have an amendment. You need a seconder for £1,000. If you don't have a seconder, that falls, and then Councillor Austin can come in with the 1,700 if she wishes.
Well, if we let that fall and we can do it for 1,700, or do we have a seconder for the 1,000?
Yeah, you have to ask.
Yes, of course. Do we have a seconder for 1,000? Not
I think we
1,700.
go 1,700.
Thank you, 1,700. All right.
God's sake.
I propose 1,700. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Okay, so the idea is that we bring it to F&GP. Be quiet, David Green. Bring it to
I was just going to
F&GP.
say 1,700 I could work with.
Yes.
Right, fine, let's vote on it. Shut up. So we bring it to F&GP with the idea that it's £1,700 at the time. All those in favour?
So you're agreeing the proposal and the amendment.
Thank you. All those against?
I don't really understand the proposal, sorry.
We're bringing it to the next F&GP with the idea that we'll give £1,700 at that F&GP
Why don't we
meeting.
just give
I thought we did.
£700 for this fund?
Because there's no fault.
Oh.
There's no precedent.
Deputy Town Clerk, explain the proposal.
The proposal is it's brought back to F&GP with an amendment allowing Councillor Green 1,700.
So it wouldn't be given out of this, it would be given out of the F&GP meeting.
Not here.
Not here. We'd be taking it to that meeting and then we would be giving the money at that meeting.
So why was the...
When's the next meeting?
That's 3 months ago.
It's
I've got a feeling it's ages away.
Can't we have an
Next year.
extraordinary meeting?
I was going to say, when we're doing an extraordinary meeting for that, then I don't know at all.
Well, 3 months.
You don't need an extraordinary meeting because they can still go on the providers that he might get it and see what we get back.
Right, so I'm asking for procedure
So
here.
the
So,
6th of October.
Oh, let's an extraordinary meeting.
right, so Deputy Town Clerk, bear in mind that meeting is a very long way away. Oh, we've got a proposal and we've started the vote for it. What do we do?
My understanding of the proposal was it will come back to F&GP. But the amendment is awarding Councillor Green 1,700 towards get started.
So the award is effectively a given, so you can go ahead with that. All we're doing is clarifying it.
When I've done a negotiation, bring it back to F&GP.
Yes, so you know that you're going to get the £1,700.
That's fine.
Is that fine?
And then in October's FNGP, Councillor Green will report back on where he's at.
Yes, yes. So, is everybody clear on that? Would you like to vote again?
They don't need to vote again.
Right,
I want to say, and they were against, so Chair, can I ask a question?
Right. Let's just clarify this. Okay, we're going along the back road. Go on. Sorry, Councillor Christensen.
I just wanted to ask, someone mentioned about an emergency FNGP, could we do it at the end of this meeting?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You have no agenda.
This meeting,
Councillor Manston, did you have a hand up?
just voting for against. You did for.
Yes. Thank you. Right, so
You
against.
get lots against in the middle of against.
Go on, you hand up.
Five and sorry, is that
I'm an abstention.
and an abstain? Right. Lordy. Okay, thank you very much.
I haven't finished.
Oh,
After I've done the events fund application, then Councillor Austin can do her plan improvements.
Yes, we're coming back to you because we thought you might like to have a shot.
All right, okay.
Right.
So I brought this events fund application to you because it's for Laugh in the Park, which is happening in August. I wouldn't normally do this, but the pandemic has sent everything into chaos. I think everybody knows what Lark in the Park is. It's called Lark in the Park Light. They've adapted it because of COVID. They're asking for £2,000 for a projected expenditure of $8,625. This is the events fund, not Ramsgate fund. Thank you. You do fund this every year.
Councillor Piper.
I think this is a very worthwhile project, and it is so well supported. Whenever you go for a walk along there, it's up and running. And I know they have only requested 2,000, but in 2019 we gave them 5, so I propose we give them 3.
So
can we not give them more? I know they've only applied for 2,000, can we not give them more? We've done that before.
It's council can decide what to do.
So if you propose that, we need a seconder.
Can I just say before that goes ahead that it's a reduced event, so I don't think they're going to need the 5,000. They're only doing 3 days at the government acre, and it's an open air, so they won't be obviously having their tents on. So I don't think we need to give them more because I don't think they need more. In fact,
well, we can vote on that. It's been proposed, so I need to offer a seconder. Is that a seconder, sir? Thank you. So,
Chair.
Let's talk about it before we vote.
Chair, can I just say my name's on this, that the applicant, because I've done work with the Globe Hub and whatever, we as East Cliff councillors have our ward surgeries in the Globe Hub in Margaret Street, and the work that they do across the area, obviously, which quite a lot takes place in Ramsgate, benefits the whole community. The community projects that they have going at the community centre are fantastic. I fully support this. They've asked for 2, they've obviously budgeted for it. Whilst I probably would support Councillor Piper's proposal, but I think they have got that. They have got the £2,000. That's what they want. So obviously, if there's a proposal, I'm going to vote with it. But I do think that we should give them what they asked.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Young and Councillor Green.
I'm just wondering, are we still...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I did that.
Yes, so it's Councillor Young and Councillor Green.
I was wondering, are we still getting money 6 weeks before the event? Because we did stipulate, didn't we, during...
We did cancel that, and yes, I've actually got the form with all the awards on it and dates to release. So, they have got permission apparently. I wouldn't release it until 6 weeks before.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Yeah, very worthwhile event, which we've supported for a number of years now. I seem to remember in the past they've asked for far more than this, and we've given them a fraction of what they've asked for. This time they do say it's a very limited programme they're offering. They're asking for £2,000. I think it would be quite extraordinary to give an organisation more than what they're actually asking for. So, although I support it, I can't support the £3,000.
Okay, well we're going to vote on the £3,000, so not whether we're supporting this necessarily, just on the £3,000 because that is the proposal on the table.
Has it been seconded?
It has been by Councillor Leslie, sorry.
Thank you.
So if you're in favour for giving them £3,000, all those in favour? All those against?
No.
Okay, that falls. Councillor Orban.
I'll propose the £2,000 as asked for.
Second
it. All those in favour? Against? Same. Thank you. Right, somewhere in here I had an agenda. Gosh, right, okay. Thanks, Eileen. Item number 9 is the freedom of town.
Chairman, we were going to go back to terms of reference
Oh, you were?
to town promotion.
I beg your pardon, thank you.
Councillor Austin, you sent an email with your ideas. So I held.
Thank you very much for holding that. I'm really sorry to be so late. And thank East Midlands Trains. I made some suggestions because there were a couple of things which I thought were unnecessarily narrow in the terms of reference, and there was one that looked so enormous that I thought we were actually responsible for the well-being of the entire world. So I thought that perhaps we could tweak some of the wording.
Yes, it was read out earlier by the Deputy Town Clerk.
Right.
So, do you propose it and then we can second it?
Can I propose?
I think you might
Do I need to do it item by item?
Yeah, I think you need to refresh council because it was
Certainly. So where it's at the top, where there's the general section there, which refers to a whole series of different areas that the committee will work with, it felt to me that it wasn't necessary to list those because they are already listed immediately below, and that therefore I was suggesting something like a committee of the Town Council established to consider and make recommendations to Council in relation to the promotion of Ramsgate as a place to live, work and visit.
Right, I'll propose that.
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Abstain? One abstain, thank you. Thank you, next one.
The second one was that under that first section on the first page, where we've got the following matters that to be amended by this committee, I was going to suggest a sort of catch-all additional item which would allow for other activities to be included without having to change the terms of reference. So something like to undertake any other activities with the objective of promoting Ramsgate that are approved by Council.
Opposed? Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Against? Abstain? Thank you.
And then the third item was on page 2 under terms of reference point 1, which reads to formulate and make recommendations to Council in relation to any strategies, plans or policies intended to improve the economic, social or environmental well-being of persons who live, work and spend leisure time in the administrative area of the Town Council, which I thought was more like Boris's job than ours.
That's quite
broad. So I thought perhaps we could try and bring that down a bit into something a little bit more practical. So I suggested to formulate and make recommendations to Council in relation to any strategies, plans and policies intended to improve the experience of living in, working in or visiting Ramsgate and to attract visitors, investors and residents to the town.
Opposed?
Second.
All those in favour? All those against?
got one on the toilet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I'll get you afterwards.
Abstain?
Give me the playground.
One abstain.
And one on the toilet.
Abstain?
No, I voted before, but I just want to raise my hand because I want something else to say.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, reading through this, can we have first reference to Vic being explained rather than just Vic?
Yeah.
Yes.
So visitor information centre in Vic in traffic, so therefore after it becomes Vic.
Yes, thank you.
And the same with any other abbreviations on any of the
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I mean,
yes.
it was the Vic that got me, and then I'm going through what's Vic. Well, oh yes, there it is. So
Yeah, I will be going through all of them. Again, these were old documents, and I'll sort them out for you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
I can't see any reference to disabled or people with problems. Have you got anything in there? Or have I missed it?
Does it, a genuine question, does it need to be that inclusive? If it's residents and visitors, aren't we
including everybody?
Exactly, regardless. I don't think it needs to be so specific. Be argued against that, but that's my understanding. Thank you. Councillor Austin, is there anything else?
No, that was the form I suggested.
That's it.
Thank you very much for hanging on.
Thank you. Okay, so now item number 9, freedom of town, which I believe has been withdrawn.
This has been withdrawn because we didn't know what the policy was. We had to find the documentation, so we will be bringing it back.
Thank you. Lovely. Right, so item number 10, Ramsgate Town Council's response to the SOS symptoms under the Secretary of State, in brackets SOS, Transport's call for evidence to inform his decision regarding the DCO Development Consent Order, application by RSP, River Strategic Partners, for a freight hub at Manston to consider the request by the Secretary of State, Deputy Town Clerk.
This has been brought to you. It came into the former town clerk's email address, 11th of June, and I believe that Councillor Green
Yes.
speak on this. Thank you.
Well, hand over to Councillor Green, thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'd like to, if you bear with me, just to read something out to you from Hansard. And the quote is this: I am not remotely unsympathetic to the concerns expressed by colleagues representing seats in West and South London. My daughter has a home in Chiswick, under the flight path to Heathrow. I am sufficiently infrequent overnight stayer not to become acclimatised to the air traffic, so I understand what it means. And I also have considerable concern for the quality of the air that my 6-year-old grandson, Soren, will breathe during the course of his life. That's Roger Gale, MP, speaking about his own personal concerns for his own family. And that's what it's about, really. It's about people with some authority trying to look after the problems that this application by RSP would cause for residents in this town that we represent. You all know, I'm sure you all know the history of this, that the expert planning inspectors found against RSP's arguments that our concerns and the damage that would be caused to Ramsgate wasn't outweighed by any national need, as they put it. And then that the Secretary of State overturned it, and the JR, funded by the residents, local residents, who raised over £100,000 to fight the JR, which is an amazing amount. The DCO was overturned. I think it might be the first one that has ever been overturned, because the arguments that the Secretary of State used were, well, he withdrew them, but he knew when he withdrew them that they would have been thrown out by the court if he hadn't. Secretary of State has now come back with a number of questions. Incidentally, he's not even asking about the extent of damage to Ramsgate. So it's, I assume even he is taking it as read. But he is asking a number of highly technical questions about whether anything has changed since he withdrew his first decision. He's also planning to employ an expert himself to report on the answers to those questions. Now, as I say, these are highly technical questions. The Secretary of State has only allowed a very short amount of time for people to respond to these questions. And we learned yesterday the Secretary of State has refused to extend that period to respond to the series of questions he has set, which to me is quite extraordinary considering the amount of time that this has been going on for. That he won't extend that period, but we are where we are. So, I'm going to make a proposal that I would like you to support. I've printed off copies of the proposal for you all, so there's no doubt as to what I'm proposing. The proposal is, due to the technical nature of the Secretary of State's questions, Ramsgate Town Council recognises the need for expert advice before responding. The short timescales imposed by the Secretary of State is meant that a swift negotiation with Peter Forbes of the Stratford's organisation, independent experts previously used by TDC. They will agree to produce a draft for consideration by the Council before the deadline of the 9th of July. Their charges are £2,000 for the draft. Should we require advice in responding to the Secretary of State's expert and others, the charge will be an extra £4,000. Both include VAT, which I think we may be able to reclaim, but the Deputy Town Clerk will advise on that. So that's the proposal. In making that proposal, I recognise that an industry expert like Stratford's won't necessarily agree with all our views about the answer to the questions. They will value their professional reputation as well as dealing with those questions for us. But the report will come back to a full council for our consideration before we decide what representation to make to the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for the proposal?
Can I ask the question?
You can, I just want to second it first because it's a proposal on the table. Councillor Hetherington. Thank you. All those that would like to speak, put your hand up, please. I've got Councillor Piper, Councillor Austin and Councillor Piper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just because I'm a pedantist, the DCO has not been quashed. That is a popular misconception. The decision by the Secretary of State was quashed. The DCO is still live and active. It has not been overturned.
Do you know, it was actually reported legally in the legal matters of different barristers that the DCO has been quashed and it was a precedent in the country. So I'm actually going to bypass that because I don't think that is of importance at the moment, and legally it was quashed.
It's written down here, Chair, in the statement of matters that the decision was quashed, not the DCO. The decision. It says so in the statement of matter here. But I don't wish to argue the toss, Chair. I will accept your ruling.
Thank you.
The difficulty I'm having here is there is only a shade over a week to get this information in to the Department of Transport.
Absolutely, it should be, isn't it?
Well, we've had a month, to be fair. By the time you get to the 9th of July deadline, we will have had 28 days, which should be ample time to address the actual questions that are being asked by the Secretary of State's Department. Any other references sent will, I'm reliably informed, be ignored because you have to specifically answer the questions set in the statement that we have in front of us. Now, the information that he's looking for is not that complicated. He's asking for the extent to which current national or local policies, including any changes since July 2020, so he wants to know what changes have occurred. For example, the Thanet local plan has been agreed and adopted. That is a change, a material change, which shouldn't take a highly paid advisor to tell us. It's a matter of fact. The local plan has been adopted. The TDC policy SP07 on Manston Airport safeguards that airport for its related activities. That wasn't set in stone prior to July 2020, it is now. So that would be an answer to that question. Only one answer, I grant you, Chair, but that would be an answer. The benefits of development is a direct question, and there is much evidence to show that Thanet has very high unemployment levels and areas of deprivation within it. And therefore, and in terms of investment into Ramsgate and job creation, it's not a difficult hurdle to jump to show the Secretary of State that we need investment, we need jobs and we need industry. Another question, specifically of the 6th, the effects of COVID. Again, it's not a difficult, you don't need a degree in economics to work this one out. People have changed their shopping habits and they're doing a lot more buying online, which is involving a lot more movement of freight, small and large items around. So that's a fairly natural statement that could be made. And there's a very interesting article provided by Alex Veitch, who is the Logistics UK's General Manager of Public Policy, showing the high and rising demand for aviation, particularly freight aviation, since COVID. And then the other major question he asks about, there are two more, sorry, Chair. One is the effects of Brexit. Well, again, it's a...
You mean there's a consensus about the effects of Brexit?
No, the word I'm looking for, thank you, Councillor Green, had just gone out of my head. Brexit has happened, not speculation, what's the word I'm looking for? It begins with an S. Subjective. It's a subjective view on whether Brexit's good, bad or indifferent, but the fact is, it has happened and there have been material changes. So we need to write to the Secretary of State about that. And then he talks about his final major implication is the extent to which the Secretary of State should, in his redetermination, have regard to the 6th carbon budget, which will include emissions and so on from international aviation. These are all key areas that the Secretary of State would like a response. I'm not a scientist, but I'm an ordinary guy in the street, and here's mine. It's done and it's been sent. It has references to international aviation articles in it, and I put it together myself with a very small amount of help from River Oak Strategic Partners themselves with regard to IATA e-commerce and ONS retail data, which I couldn't get for myself.
So basically what you're saying, it wasn't an independent report, you've had RSP to help you. I counter that.
No, I'm an
Councillor
individual,
Piper.
and I took
Exactly, but I counter that. We are the council, and if I could just read whether the quantitative need for the development has been affected by any changes since 9th of July 2019, and if so, a description of any such changes and the impacts of the level of need of those changes, such as, but not limited to, changes in demand for air freight, changes of the capacity at other airports, locational requirements for air freight and effects of Brexit or COVID. I can see that my knowledge as an individual compared to an independent aviation expert would be very different. I'm representing the council here. I don't want to put my view on it. I want an independent aviation expert to explain exactly what the information in the realm out there is.
Yes.
So I think it's very important that we as a council protect ourselves from just putting our personal opinion across, and we get experts' advice.
Chairman, thank you for your interruption. The opinion that I am voicing here as an elected member of this chamber is my opinion, and I am entitled to make it.
Yes.
So your comeback at me, to be fair, is not relevant. I haven't mentioned Ramsgate Town Council's response. I'm talking about my response. And my response to the Secretary of State has not been that difficult to put together. I wanted some figures about ONS figures, so I went to River Oak Strategic Partners to get those figures. Anybody can do the same thing. My real concern about spending taxpayers' money on the next stage of this is that there is a very short time limit. So there is no time for someone who is not extremely familiar with the current circumstances, post-Brexit, post-COVID, international freight aviation movements and all of those things, environmental impact of changing fuel systems for aircraft. There is no time to get a really good consultant to come up with the answers that the Secretary of State requires and get back to us here and us have a meeting and approve it or not approve it before it gets sent off to the Secretary of State. There just isn't the time.
Well, I believe there is the time. I also believe that RSP, and I'm sure Jenny Dawson of Judicial Review would be exploring their own expert witnesses for something, because although the timescale is short, and what a shame that is, the Secretary of State didn't extend it, we are given that timescale. So if we have to move on it, we move on it. Councillor Austin.
Well, my final point responding to you, Chair, is that this has nothing to do with Jenny Dawson.
I'm not saying...
And it has nothing to do with the Judicial Review, so I don't know why you mentioned it.
Because you're saying that we don't have time to do something, but RSP will bring up their own expert. Other people have to deal with the same time frame. So the Ramsgate Town Council has to deal with that same time frame. That's what I'm saying. Whichever expert witness is used by either which organisation, we still have to take the same time scale. So we're still restricted by this 9th of July deadline, unfortunately. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I just want to ask a question, actually. It was about the charges. So the charges are £2,000 for the draft, which we would then have a look at and proceed from that. The next bit about should we require advice. Dave, can you just explain a bit more about how that would work? Is this is after the 9th of July deadline, if there's a further stage where experts are talking to each other, as it were?
The Secretary of State has said that after he's collected all the initial opinions by the 9th deadline, there will then be the opportunity for interested parties to comment on each other's.
Yes. So it's past somebody to.
It's exactly what happened during the initial
the previous
DCO.
Yes.
And it's that.
and it's that
That would take more time for an expert advising us to put together.
Right, that makes
That
sense.
makes
Thank
clear.
you. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. In view of this short time that we have as a council to respond, there are many different views within the council about whether the airport should reopen or not. This is a lot of money to pay for experts. Why don't we put out an invitation for members of the council, different members of the council, who all are passionate one way or the other about the airport? Why can't we send to Eileen an email covering these questions individually, and then it can be republished, and then we can decide which view we're going to go for, and a letter. Surely amongst us we have the articulation to put forward a letter that will not cost us this money and will be done more quickly.
Well, there's two things
and
to that.
We'll have Ramsgate Town Councils stamp on it, because it will have the passionate views and the expertise within this room.
Right, so if I could answer that before I ask anybody in the room, there are two things to that. First of all, we have a proposal on the table that we're about to vote for in a minute, so we can't do anything until that is out of the way. And secondly, if we're arguing the case of time limit, then I would have thought that that would have been the longer view, quite frankly.
But it depends. If you want it done quickly and you want the views of Ramsgate Town Council, you could send your email into Eileen this week, by the end of the week, because I know opinions. We've all got different expertise, we've all got different statistics at our fingertips, and it would be a more robust opinion than this expert.
But okay, so everybody has an opinion, and then that comes down to do you want it or don't you want it, or I think it should. Whereas
expert opinions based on statistics that I'm sure we've all got.
As a town body, I think that this would be something that we need independent advice on. However, I'm going to go to the room, so I'm going to start with Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand what Councillor Piper was saying, but I do think that if we're going to answer as a council to the Secretary of State's questions, and I fully understand what both Councillor Pipers have said, and maybe if we'd had more time that we could actually do that. But I think it's important for our residents that they see that we've got an independent point to answer the questions, instead of whatever side that you're on, that we make up our own to bang it in so it pleases us. But I mean, I really do think we need to go with independent advice.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Austin, Councillor Wing, and then Councillor Manston.
Huxley.
And then I've got Huxley, and then I've got Hetherington. In that order.
I was just going to say, I quite understand what Councillor Piper's saying, and I agree with Councillor Alban that if we've had more time, that might have been a way to go.
I think there's two problems about that. The first one is the level of technical expertise that we have. And the second one is time from the point of view that a number of us are not as efficient as Councillor Piper and have not written our personal submissions yet. Yes. Some of us have been doing we've got our own submissions. We've also various of us represent other groups that have been invited to respond, and we've got those to do.
Yes.
And certainly speaking for myself, I wouldn't have time to contribute.
Okay, thank you.
And time management lessons, I'll ask for it.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think the one thing we all have in common is we stick to the teeth of this. But the very reason, and I will support an expert, I don't necessarily like spending council money on this type of stuff, and I'm probably one of the most highly qualified people in this room alongside some others, but I have no expertise on aviation whatsoever. So I'm not going to sit here and say I can answer these questions because I cannot. And even if I could answer these questions, the psychology of human people is that they will find information to support their argument, which is why not using an independent is flawed. Because each of us, I will write the answers to my questions with the little experience I have in support of not having an answer and not having an airport. And the people in this room that support an airport, and I respect that fact, will write their own answers in support of the airport. Buying in this expert worries me because this expert might not give the information that I want as a non-airport supporting person. And we need to remain neutral, we need to be independent, and I think we definitely need to make sure we have an independent expert that knows what they're talking about to write a report that we can then look at and decide whether it goes forward or not. I will be writing a submission as an individual person and a ward councillor. I have no idea how I'm going to answer a lot of these questions because I think it's a lot more than the local plan was agreed. The local plan should have been agreed way before that. It was delayed. So the local plan we actually agreed upon wasn't the one that I thought should have been agreed upon years ago. So there are flaws in every bit of information every single one of us sends to the Department of Transport, which is why I fully support the use of an independent expert to write a report. What the report says, if it says the airport's viable, then I will go with it.
Thank you. Manston.
I was just going to say, individuals can send in their own comments and their own analysis and their own statistics. It's just that we can't send a few individual, not in the time available, comments in to represent the council in the time we've got available. And we can't just ask one person or two people to write it because everybody's got different opinions.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden.
One of the reasons that we have a problem with compiling our own collection of responses is the timescale we're left with, and however we got to this stage, that's the timescale we're left with. Yes. But I want to refer back to the plethora of letters that have come in via Eileen from the residents, which I felt were fairly evenly divided between pro-airport and anti-airport. One way or another, I didn't actually count the final lot. I think it was slightly in favour of anti-airport, but it's very even. The thing that really struck me about those was you have two camps, one saying jobs, one saying health. And along the lines is pro-jobs, the health information that's been submitted is rubbish. Pro saving our health, but the jobs information is submitted as rubbish. So we've got two groups of people looking at the same statistics and coming up with two different conclusions. And I think that's the real problem of us trying to do it, because we do have different opinions in this group. And that's why I will support the independent one. Just as Councillor Wing says, it may not come up with the answer I want, but that's why I will support it, because I don't think we stand hell's chance for green. Sorry.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Hetherington and Councillor Young and Councillor Piper. Thank you. Councillor Hetherington.
Yeah, I agree with the points that have been made about cognitive bias. We all have opinions in this room, and we're entitled to write those in our personal statements, etc., etc. But I certainly don't have the expertise. I'd like Stuart and Linda to be able to respond to this with that, and I would favour an independent expert. And actually, I think it's quite cheap. Having just spoken to a solicitor recently who charged me £250 an hour, this seems to me very cheap.
Councillor Young.
Just one point. It's so long, coming to the council meeting. Was there some other time that we could have had this brought before us?
Of meetings, I think of meetings we've had to wait for this meeting, so I think it just
had a special meeting.
You have to give a certain amount of notice.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. I was
Councillor linked my question.
Okay.
Also, it only takes 3 days for a council meeting to be called, an emergency council meeting. 3 days? We have had time to do this. And yes, we all lead busy lives, but this is an important issue for so many people that I'm surprised it hasn't come up before now.
Thank you.
Okay, this came in through the former town clerk's email address. It wasn't monitored, it was the only thing that came in since he left.
Oh, right.
Dean found it.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was dated 11th of June. And it's come before council.
Oh, right, okay, so thank you. So we have that. So last one has, and then David Green's got the right to reply. So
very kind, Chair, thank you very much. One of the personal difficulties I face now is one of credibility. I have submitted my responses all the way along in the last couple of years to the Secretary of State. I have an email from his department today acknowledging receipt of my submission on this. I cannot have my name attached to a contrary view from Ramsgate Town Council that includes me.
But we are a democratic, we're a democratic group.
That's not the point. My name cannot be on any proposal that is contrary to what I have already written to the Secretary of State. So I'm asking that we could please have a recorded vote, and then when any information, regardless of whether it's reasonably or not, is sent to the Secretary of State, the names of the councillors who have supported it are on the letter, rather than the council, which would include me, which is nonsense, because I've already written.
Right. I think... yes, okay, town clerk first.
So you'll have your extraordinary meeting, and we'll make sure we've got the paperwork for a county vote, and that will be something that we can submit.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
It's just like the minutes. There's no difference.
Thank you.
Super, thank you. Right, I'm going to give Councillor Green the right to reply before we vote.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something about the local plan. Yes, the local plan does reserve the site for an airport. But I attended the local plan hearings, and I listened to the planning inspector, and he made it quite clear that he was agreeing to reserving the site for an airport purely to allow the decision about the DCO to be made. And that is why he has ordered the council to produce a revised local plan. And the council, I would suggest, won't do that until the decision about the DCO is made. And then the council will have to work with that decision. The local plan makes other policies too. The local plan's vision for Ramsgate states the council will seek to support the continued regeneration and development of Ramsgate, focusing on its maritime heritage and developing it in a role. The council's, Thanet District Council this is, recent bids for both the future High Street Fund and the Levelling Up Fund seek to enhance this vision. It is impossible to see how this vision for Ramsgate can be successfully delivered, if at all, if RSP's alternative vision of an aircraft hub at Manston is granted a DCO, since this would result in cargo planes flying directly over the town. It would wreck Ramsgate as a visitor attraction, in my opinion. So it's not clear cut about the local plan and the impact. Councillor Piper is right, it is a new factor, but it's not clear cut how it would impact on how the Secretary of State should make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, so that's the right to reply. So we have the proposal in front of us now, and I'm going to go to the vote. So all those in favour of the proposal, please put your hands up. Thank you. All those against?
Abstain.
1 second. Thank you. Against 2. And those abstain? Thank you.
What was the result, Chair? What was the result?
It's carried.
5.
3. 2 against, 1 abstain.
12 for it, 3 against and 1 abstain.
We've got 1 absence. Thank you. So thank you for your professionalism in that. Right, we've got item number 11, Deputy Town Clerk's report. Sorry, Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we leave that agenda item, this is slightly tongue-in-cheek and not sour grapes, I promise you, but before the previous town clerk left office, a request was made that he seek to get at least £5,000 of the £10,000 that was sent to Jenny Dawes back, because according to her own reports, there never was a shortfall, and the money was given on condition that there be a shortfall for that judicial review. That judicial review is finished. There was no shortfall. We really should have written to have the money returned by now, and I note that we haven't.
Right, I'd have to ask, do we know that there's no shortfall? I'd have to ask information on that. But I've got Councillor Wing, sorry. Deputy Town Clerk, did you want to answer that?
I wrote to Mrs Dawes to request a breakdown of what the 5,000 which RTC paid towards the judicial review was spent on. Also, the further 5k will need to be accounted for as spent. Her email back said, I can confirm that the monies paid by RTC were applied for the purposes set out in the letters dated 30th of July and 2nd of September, I would point out that the letter accompanying the settlement payment did not stipulate that it should only be used in the event of a shortfall. However, I can confirm that there would have been a shortfall in funding at various stages throughout the process.
With respect, Chair, that's not what she put on her website at the time. It's not.
Right, well, Councillor Wing,
I have to say I support Stuart Piper in this, because I donated quite handsomely as an individual, and also as I actually abstained on the matter. And we ask events, when we've just looked at a whole load of people applying for money and groups applying for money, and we insist on accounts. And I too, as an individual that contributed and as somebody that sits on this council, would like to see a breakdown of where that money was used. I mean, if you quid for the secretary, surely then that because I, as a councillor in Central Harbour, are asked by residents what was the money spent on. Was there a shortfall? Did we get any money back from River Oak Strategic Partners? They're all rumours that have gone round and round and round. And really, I do think that Jenny Dawes, because it's her judicial review, should present some sort of paperwork to not only to this, but it should be made public to people like me who contributed. I'd also like to say that I feel really upset about the airport. It's one of those things that has divided our community, and I basically think that everybody around this table cares about their communities. So every time this toxic issue comes up that is so important to us for so many reasons, it just leaves me sad.
I think we all agree with that. I've got Councillor Piper and then Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with Councillor Wing here. We should have to look at a breakdown of all the money that she has spent, what she used it for, and her justification for not giving any of it back. If you could request that, Eileen, that would be great, and perhaps we could look at it at the next meeting.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Whilst this is an important matter, and I do support that we should know where this council's money is being spent on, but I think this is the wrong time now. I think this needs to be an item on the next council or whatever committee, F&G, whatever it is. Because I do recall myself making a point at the time and a proposal at the time that the money that this council was putting forward towards the judicial review should only be given if it was necessary. Unfortunately, I was outvoted on that. But certainly, you know, that would then have been a different matter to what we're talking about now, because if there wasn't a shortfall, then we would have got our money back. And that is what I was trying to do, was to protect our residents' money. But so I do think this is an important matter, Chair, and I do think that maybe this needs a discussion proper, an item on its own, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I need Councillor Hetherington and Councillor Green, and then Councillor Crittenden.
I just want to say, yes, it is a very divisive issue, and I do find it upsetting, and I do find the length of time this has gone on and on and on, been hanging over us, just extraordinary. And I mean, we are all here as Ramsgate Town Council members to do the best for Ramsgate, which is what we are trying to do in our own individual ways. And I'd just like to say that.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
I profoundly disagree with what's been spoken of here. I think the original motion for us to support the judicial review was by me. And from memory, it stated that we would grant £5,000 towards the review, and that we would grant another £5,000 if it was required. Unfortunately, I don't think that motion was implemented by the previous town clerk. The second part, according to the letters that the deputy town clerk has read out, was given as a grant and not with that condition on it. Jenny Dawes is a private individual. She financed the JR herself. Yes, she had a crowdfunder to help her, but she is, to me, is under no obligation to answer those sort of questions and lay out before us what the money was spent on. She's been asked whether our money was spent on the matters that we said it should be, and she's answered yes, it was. I don't think, well, we can ask her, of course we can ask her, but I personally don't think she's under any obligation to us to answer in any other way.
I would have to agree with Councillor Green. We can ask, but she's under no obligation to tell us what she's done with that money. She's dealing, as she says, as an individual raising money, and there's a crowdfunder that she's using the money to raise for. It's up to her to use that money with her legals in the way that she sees fit. If I give to the crowdfunder, I've given to her doing her job. That's my personal, prerogative. We can ask her if you want to, but I don't understand, she's under no obligation to report back to the town council what she's done with the money.
Perhaps it's a matter of a former town clerk.
No, it isn't personal money. It's our residents' money.
Yeah. No,
it's our residents' money that she has spent. And just as Councillor says, when residents ask what has happened to that money, we need to say with confidence.
You've just been told what's happened to that money. The money has just been used appropriately as was expected. The deputy town clerk has literally just read you that.
I would like to see it. Surely there is no harm in seeing the breakdown.
Well, there's no harm in asking for it. We can't necessarily force her to give it to her. If you want to ask her, then we can ask her. But she's already answered the question once from the Deputy Town Clerk. If you want to ask for a breakdown, all we can do is ask. We cannot expect the reply back that we want. All we can do is ask. Councillor Huxley.
It seems unfortunate that the former town clerk acted the way he did. We are where we are, though. I think we should tonight be able to say to the Deputy Town Clerk that we would ask if she could write to Jenny Dawes again to see whether or not it is possible to obtain a more detailed breakdown. We do have a responsibility to our residents, and I know that we have a very mixed bag result of people who approved of that original decision and those who didn't, rather like I said earlier. And I would be hoping that we would be able to make that decision tonight, because if we defer that to the next meeting, it's more time that is going on and on and on. So, with all due respect to Councillor Alban, I'm much more inclined to agree with Councillors Piper and see if we can actually make that decision tonight.
Well,
just to ask Eileen to see if you can get more detail.
I haven't responded to Mrs. Dawes' email, so I can simply respond and say, can you give me more information?
Because we are a election body, we do have a responsibility to respond to our...
We are, exactly, as a council, if you want to ask, then that's one thing, but like I say, she doesn't have to reply. Just bear that in mind. It's up to her what she does. I'm just suggesting, anyway, Councillor Green.
I strongly object, Chair. This is not an agenda item.
I agree with that. Yes, go on.
Okay, and you will need to bring this back to an extraordinary meeting of council, which I can put as
Sorry,
long as
may I leave, please?
Yeah, thank you for saying.
the chairman needs to call the meeting, so the only option really is to have it before a meetings committee on Wednesday next week, the 7th.
Yeah.
Because you're committed to come into a meeting anyway.
Yes.
Thank you. You in agreement with that?
Yes, agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Oh, there was the Deputy Town Clerk's report.
Nothing. Do that.
Oh, lucky us.
Thank you.
I reckon the Simplex Council is far more entertaining.
Yes.
Right.